An important meeting just took place between China's Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. The meeting was in Russia, and it was I think we might look back and see this as as an epical event. Now, Biden on his own at around the same time was meeting with Trudeau in Canada, but this was a frivolous meeting. In fact, here's Trudeau. He's like, I brought you some chocolates that were made by some immigrants. And so this was the kind of nonsense going back and forth between these two political midgets. And in the meantime, a much more statesman-like meeting in which we heard that, quote, change is coming that hasn't happened in 100 years. Now, that's the kind of statement that gets your attention and makes you think. There's a massive kind of reshaping taking place in the world. And the United States, which has had the dominant position in the world, is losing it and losing it very rapidly. Think of how the world looks different in just 10 or 20 years. If you looked at, for example, the per capita GDP between the United States and China, the United States was way ahead, 3 times as much as China. And the Chinese are now catching up. And in terms of purchasing power, they're fairly close to catching up. They'll probably catch up in the next 10 or 15 years. And let's remember that China has a much larger population. So if the per capita spending power of each Chinese family is the same as each American family, but there are 3 times as many Chinese families, the Chinese will have a vastly bigger economy than the United States. And that means they can put a lot more into defense, a lot more into research and technology. There are just long-term implications. I mean, it's very hard to say that the 21st century belongs to America in the same way that the 20th century most clearly did. Now, the worst thing about all this, some of it would happen by itself, is that Biden is driving it. He is pushing Putin and Xi closer together. He is actually creating more powerful enemies, long-term enemies for the United States. He's also taking countries like India, which have traditionally been friendly to the United States, at least friendly for the past couple of decades, and causing them to have second thoughts. In part, this is because of the Biden regime's ruthless prosecution of gay rights and LGBTQ and attempts to tie foreign aid to the embrace of all this sort of transgender stuff. And the Africans are recoiling, and the Indians are recoiling, and the Asians are recoiling. And basically, Putin himself is saying that if you are a member of a traditional culture and you believe in traditional values, the United States is now your deadly enemy. And so here we have Xi and Putin talking about creating, quote, a special relationship and a, quote, no limits friendship. So what does that mean? It means that China and Russia are going to partner on a multiplicity of fronts. This is not a case of a moderate alliance. They happen to agree on Ukraine, or they happen to agree that they should share technology. No, they're investing in each other's infrastructure. Now, I would say that for the first time, the senior partner of this relationship is China. Russia is in a kind of subordinate position. And but the long-term implications of this, as I say, reach far and wide. Here's an example of what I mean. I pick up this article from the Indian press. India and Bangladesh, 2 countries that are traditionally pro-Western, have agreed to start moving away from the dollar in their mutual transactions. So typically, for example, if the Bangladeshis would spend money in India, the money would be converted into dollars and then from dollars into Indian rupees. So kind of a double transaction. Similarly, if Bangladesh did exports and imports with India, the exports would be converted into dollars and converted back into rupees and vice versa. The Bangladeshi currency is called the taka. But the Indians and the Bangladeshis have suddenly realized, wait a minute, why are we doing this double conversion? Why don't we just create a system where we cut out the dollar completely and we just deal on a bilateral basis with each other? And so So the Indians and Bangladeshis are, as we speak, working this out, and that means that the dollar, this is a small snapshot of how the dollar is losing its status again. And this is not directly related to China. It's not directly related to Russia. It just shows that the emergence of BRICS, this kind of new alliance of Brazil and Russia and India and China and South Africa, these BRICS nations, is now convincing countries to start dumping the dollar or ditching the dollar. The New York Times, in commenting on all this, and I might talk more about this tomorrow, basically says China's making a huge mistake. China has come to its current position by making an alliance with the West, by trading with the West. So Xi is committing a strategic blunder. This, I think, reveals the parochialism and narrowness of the New York Times, not of Xi. Xi completely realizes that he's not in the same position as Deng Xiaoping in the 1970s. For Deng Xiaoping, yes, given the fact that the Chinese economy was in stasis, he had to open up China to the West. In fact, he needed a market for Chinese products. So all of that needed to happen over the past 50 years. But the point is, it has happened. And China now, I think correctly, is betting we no longer need the West. The West is more divided and more irresponsible and more unadmirable than ever before. We can create a new system, and a lot of countries in the world are going to be attracted to our way of doing things.